The lawyer's voice echoed through the oak-paneled room like a funeral bell. 23 family members sat in silence, eyes fixed on the sealed envelope in his trembling hands. Grandma Rose had been dead for 3 days, but somehow she still commanded the room. "Before we discuss the will," the lawyer said, adjusting his glasses, "Mrs. Rose Montgomery left specific instructions. This letter must be read aloud. All beneficiaries must be present." My cousin Jessica shifted in her designer heels, checking her phone. Uncle Frank loosened his tie, already calculating his share. Aunt Linda dabbed her eyes with a tissue that had seen no tears. I sat in the back corner, watching them like vultures circling something that wasn't yet dead. The envelope tore open with a sound like ripping fabric. Inside was a single sheet of paper covered in Grandma's shaky handwriting. The lawyer cleared his throat and began to read. "To my beloved family, I have watched you for 78 years. I know what you've become." The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Grandma Rose had lived in the same house for 56 years, a modest 2-story colonial with peeling yellow paint and a garden that bloomed even in winter. She'd raised 4 children there after Grandpa died in the factory accident, worked double shifts at the diner, put all 4 through college on tips and willpower. But somewhere along the way, her children forgot where they came from. Uncle Frank became a hedge fund manager who hadn't visited in 3 years. Aunt Linda married a surgeon and moved to a gated community. My father, the youngest, sent birthday cards with no return address. Only Aunt Carol, the oldest, came by every Sunday, though she spent most of the visit talking about her problems. I was the exception. Every Saturday morning, I'd show up at Grandma's door with coffee and bagels. We'd sit on her porch swing and she'd tell me stories about when the world was different, when family meant something more than shared DNA and awkward holiday dinners. "Emma," she told me 6 months ago, gripping my hand with surprising strength, "I'm going to teach them all a lesson, but I need you to be strong enough to watch it happen." I didn't understand then. I was about to. The lawyer's voice cracked as he continued reading. "Frank, you haven't called me on my birthday in 7 years. You sent your secretary to my hospital bed when I had pneumonia. She didn't know I'm allergic to lilies." Uncle Frank's face turned the color of spoiled meat. His wife stared at her lap. "Linda, you uninvited me to Thanksgiving because your new friends didn't know you came from a family that once lived in a trailer. You told them I was dead." Aunt Linda stood up, her chair screeching against the hardwood. "This is ridiculous. She's trying to manipulate us from the grave." "Sit down," the lawyer said quietly, "or you forfeit everything." She sat. "Tom," the letter continued, addressing my father, "you disappeared for 5 years because you were ashamed of where you came from. You have a daughter who needed a father, but you were too busy reinventing yourself to notice." My father's jaw clenched. He wouldn't look at me. "Carol, you visited every week, but you know what you did. You know what you took from my jewelry box and pawned. You know about the checks you forged. Family visits don't erase theft." Aunt Carol's sobs filled the silence, real ones this time. The lawyer paused, taking a sip of water. His hands shook harder now. Whatever came next, he'd read it already. He knew what was coming. "I am leaving my entire estate, the house, the savings, the life insurance, all $2.3 million to one person, the only person who loved me without wanting something in return, the only person who saw me as a human being instead of a bank account or a burden or an embarrassment." Every eye in the room turned to me. 23 faces twisted with shock, rage, and disbelief. Uncle Frank started to stand. Aunt Linda's mouth opened to protest. Then the lawyer read the final paragraph. "But Emma will only receive this inheritance if she completes one task. She must spend the next 6 months living in my house, going through my belongings, and reading my journals. Only then will she understand why I made this choice. Only then will she know the truth about this family, and only then will she decide what you all deserve." The room erupted. Voices overlapped in a cacophony of outrage. Uncle Frank demanded his lawyer. Aunt Linda threatened to contest the will. My father finally looked at me, his expression unreadable. Through it all, I sat frozen, remembering the last thing Grandma said to me in the hospital. She'd squeezed my hand and whispered, "When they're all screaming, remember this sentence. I loved you enough to let you hate me for telling you the truth." I hadn't understood. Now, watching my family tear itself apart over money they hadn't earned, I was beginning to. The house smelled like lavender and old books. I stood in Grandma's bedroom surrounded by boxes she'd labeled in precise handwriting: 1965, 1970, 1971, 1980, and so on, all the way to 2024, 2025. I started with the earliest journal. The leather cover was cracked, the pages yellowed. Her handwriting was younger then, more confident. November 3rd, 1965. Frank came home from school with a black eye today. He said he got in a fight defending a smaller boy. I was so proud. 20 years from now, I hope he remembers what it feels like to protect someone weaker than himself. I flipped forward, hundreds of entries about my father's first steps, Aunt Linda's piano recitals, Aunt Carol's art projects, every small moment preserved like pressed flowers. Then I found the entry that changed everything. May 17th, 1987. I received the call today. The factory is offering a settlement for Robert's death, $847,000. My lawyer says it's a lowball offer, that I could get more if I fight. But fighting means lawyers and years in court and my children watching me become bitter. I'm going to take it. I'm going to invest it quietly, let it grow, let them think we're still poor, let them learn to work for what they want, because if they know about this money now, it will destroy them before they're strong enough to handle it. My hands trembled. For 40 years she'd lived in that modest house, worked at that diner, clipped coupons while sitting on a fortune that could have made everything easier. She'd chosen to let us struggle, to let her children think she had nothing. The question was, why? Uncle Frank called first. "Emma, sweetheart, we need to talk about this situation. I'm sure Grandma wasn't in her right mind at the end. We can work something out that's fair for everyone." I hung up. Aunt Linda tried a different approach. She showed up at the house with flowers and tears. "I know I made mistakes, but she was my mother. Doesn't that count for something?" "You told people she was dead. What does that count for?" My father was the hardest. He sat in his car outside the house for 3 hours before finally knocking. When I opened the door, he looked smaller than I remembered. "I'm not here about the money. I'm here to say I'm sorry for everything, for disappearing, for missing your childhood, for being ashamed of the woman who gave me everything." "Grandma's not here to accept your apology," I said. "I know. That's why I'm giving it to you." We sat on the porch swing where Grandma and I used to sit. He told me about the years he'd spent running from his past, building a new identity, pretending his mother wasn't someone she was. He told me about the moment he realized he'd traded his family for an illusion of success. "She knew," he said, finally. "She knew all of it, and she still sent me birthday cards, still called on Christmas, still loved me even when I didn't deserve it." For the first time in my life, I saw my father cry. 3 months into my stay, I found the locked room in the basement. The key was in the 1995 journal, taped to a page that simply said, "For Emma when she's ready." The door opened onto a wall of filing cabinets. Each drawer was labeled with a name: Frank, Linda, Tom, Carol, and dozens of others, cousins, friends, neighbors. I opened my father's drawer first. Inside were letters he'd written to Grandma over the years, letters that began with apologies and ended with requests for money. Dozens of them, each one filed neatly with her handwritten notes, sent $500 for rent, sent $1,200 for Emma's school supplies, sent $3,000 for emergency he wouldn't explain. Uncle Frank's drawer was worse. Invoices from investment schemes he'd tried to rope her into, brochures for timeshares and reverse mortgages, a contract where he tried to get her to sign over the house as collateral for his business loan. Aunt Linda's drawer held copies of the invitations to family events Grandma was never sent. Birthday parties, graduations, weddings, all happening in her name without her presence. But Aunt Carol's drawer was the heaviest. Police reports, pawn shop receipts, Grandma's own notes tracking the jewelry that disappeared, the forged checks, the stolen credit cards, and at the bottom, a letter in Grandma's handwriting never sent. Carol, I know it's you. I've always known, but you're sick in a way that prison won't fix, so I pay your debts in silence, and I pray that someday you'll find the strength to stop. I love you too much to destroy you, even if you're destroying me. I sat on the basement floor and cried until I couldn't breathe. The last journal was different. It was new, the pages crisp. She'd started it the day after her cancer diagnosis. January 8th, 2025, stage 4, 6 months, maybe less. The doctor looked at me like I should be devastated, but I've had 78 years. That's more than most people get. Now I have to decide what to do with what's left. January 15th, 2025. I told Emma today that I'm teaching everyone a lesson. She thought I meant about the money, but the money is just a tool. The real lesson is about love, about the difference between loving someone and loving what they can give you. February 3rd, 2025. I'm leaving everything to Emma not because she's perfect, but because she's the only one who saw me, really saw me, not as a source of money or an embarrassment to hide, just as Rose, a woman who liked terrible reality TV and couldn't cook to save her life and laughed too loud at her own jokes. February 28th, 2025. I know what will happen when they read the will. They'll be angry. They'll feel betrayed. Good. Anger is honest. It's more honest than the fake love they've been performing. Maybe in their anger, they'll finally see themselves clearly, and maybe some of them will find their way back to who they used to be. The final entry was dated the day before she died. March 15th, 2025. Emma, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry for the burden I've placed on you, but you're strong enough to carry it, strong enough to make the decision I couldn't make. At the end of these 6 months, you'll have a choice. You can keep everything and watch our family tear itself apart, or you can do what you think is right. Whatever you choose, know that I'm proud of you. Know that you were the gift I needed when I thought I had nothing left to give. P.S. Check the garden. Under the rose bush we planted together. There's one more thing you need to find. The garden was overgrown, the roses wild and tangled. I dug carefully beneath the bush we'd planted on my 16th birthday. The shovel hit metal after 2 feet. The box was small, waterproof, sealed tight. Inside was a stack of envelopes, each one addressed to a different family member, and one more item, a photograph. It was from 1985, Grandma and Grandpa, young and laughing, surrounded by their 4 children. Uncle Frank had his arms around his siblings. Aunt Linda was making a silly face. My father was grinning like the world was full of possibilities. Aunt Carol was holding a dandelion like it was made of gold. They looked happy. They looked like family. On the back, in Grandma's handwriting, remember when love was this simple? I opened the envelopes one by one. Each contained a personal letter written in Grandma's final weeks. Private words, painful truths, and something else, forgiveness. Not the cheap kind that costs nothing, the expensive kind that acknowledges every hurt and chooses love anyway. Uncle Frank's letter ended with, "I'm proud of the man you were. I hope you can find him again." Aunt Linda's, "You were never an embarrassment. You were my daughter. I'm sorry I didn't fight harder to make you believe that." My father's, "Tom, you gave me the greatest gift, Emma. Through her, I got to see you become the man I always knew you could be, even if you couldn't see it yourself." Aunt Carol's, "I forgive you, not because what you did was okay, but because carrying this anger would poison both of us. Get help, get better, live." At the bottom of the box was one final envelope, addressed to me. The 6 months ended on a Tuesday. The lawyer has scheduled a final meeting. All beneficiaries were required to attend. They filled in like ghosts of themselves. Uncle Frank had aged a decade. Aunt Linda's designer clothes looked like a costume. My father held my gaze this time, steady and sad. Aunt Carol was missing. In rehab, someone whispered. I stood at the front of the room with the box of letters and Grandma's final message to me, which I'd memorized. Grandma left you all letters, private letters, words she couldn't say when she was alive because she was too hurt, too angry, too proud. I'm going to give them to you now. You can read them or burn them. That's your choice. I distributed the envelopes. Uncle Frank's hands shook as he took his. Aunt Linda's tears were real this time. As for the inheritance, I'm not keeping it. Uncle Frank's head snapped up. You're giving it to us? No, I'm using it the way Grandma would have if she'd been brave enough. I'm creating a foundation in her name. It will provide scholarships for kids whose parents can't afford college. It will help families going through medical hardships. It will do the work Grandma spent her whole life doing, taking care of people who need help. You can't do that, Aunt Linda shouted. That's our money. No, I said quietly. It was never yours. It was Grandma's, and she spent 78 years watching you prove you didn't deserve it. She gave you everything, her youth, her health, her heart, and you gave her nothing but reasons to die disappointed. The room went silent. But here's the thing about Grandma, I continued, my voice breaking. Even after everything, she still loved you. Every single one of you. She wrote you letters of forgiveness. She gave you one last chance to remember who you used to be, who you could still become. I looked at my father. She taught me that real love isn't about giving people what they want. It's about giving them what they need, even when it costs you everything. Uncle Frank opened his letter. I watched his face crumble as he read it. Aunt Linda pressed hers against her heart like a lifeline. My father walked to the front of the room. He hugged me, really hugged me for the first time I could remember. She'd be so proud of you, he whispered. I'm so proud of you. As everyone filed out, reading their letters through tears, I stayed behind in the empty room. The lawyer approached with a small smile. There's one thing I didn't tell you. Your grandma left me a sealed letter to open after you made your decision. She wrote 2 versions, one if you kept the money, one if you didn't. He handed me the envelope. Inside was a single sentence in Grandma's handwriting. I knew you'd choose love. That's why you were always my favorite. 6 months later, the foundation was thriving. Uncle Frank had donated his time to help manage the investments. Aunt Linda volunteered at family outreach programs. My father visited every week, making up for lost time. Aunt Carol sent a letter from rehab. I'm getting better, slowly. Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for showing me what Grandma's love actually looked like. I still lived in the yellow house, still sat on the porch swing, and every Saturday morning I poured 2 cups of coffee, even though I drank them both alone. Because Grandma had taught me the most important lesson of all. Love isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up. It's about telling the truth even when it hurts. It's about choosing grace over bitterness, forgiveness over revenge, and family over everything. Even when it costs you everything, especially then.